Well, today, part 2 of the Subway Hero or Subway Killer. Yep, the prosecution. It's resting its case, and now it's time for the defense to do their thing. Well, we're going to talk about that and a whole lot more on this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. Yep, it's what some people calling it the fastest minutes in podcasting.
The views and opinions expressed in this presentation are solely those of the individuals interviewed or participating and do not represent those of city, county, state, or federal law enforcement agencies, nor sponsors and platforms of this presentation. Charlie Crimebuster, charliecrimebuster.com, and peacemakernetwork.com are copyrights owned by Charlie Crimebuster. All individuals described or mentioned in the presentation should be considered innocent until found guilty in a court of law. This presentation contains subject matter such as violence and graphic descriptions which may not be suitable for all audiences. Listener and viewer discretion is advised.
Well, hello and welcome to this episode of Charlie Crimebuster. We're talking about that Subway Hero or Subway Killer. We're talking about Daniel Penny, of course. His trial is right now going on as we are recording this podcast. Now, you know, I like to kind of stay out of showing my opinion a lot. Sometimes just let you make your own opinion. But this one's been hard to stay out of. It really has. I'm feeling pretty passionate about it. You know, today, the reason, I believe the reason why we don't have so many heroes is nobody's going to let them be a hero anymore. That's what it looks like to me. Well, we're going to talk about that. Hang on, we'll be right there. But let's do a little housekeeping first. I'd like to invite you to reach out to me with a shout-out. Reach out with a shout-out. You can reach me, Charlie Crimebuster, at gmail.com. charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. If you'd like to support what we're doing, and we would invite you to do that, it'd be a very great help to us, and we would love you to be a part of the team, then just jump right on over to peacemakernetwork.com. peacemakernetwork.com. We talk on that particular website. We share with you all about those brave men and women who run toward danger instead of away from danger. We are talking about law enforcement. Yep, we're talking about first responders and, of course, the brave men and women of military. You can read all about that. Just jump over there to peacemakernetwork.com. If you like to get caught up on the episodes, we've got a bunch of them out there. We're trying to reorganize it a little bit so you can find the episode you want to find a little faster. But the best way to do it is to go to our website, charliecrimebuster.com, charliecrimebuster.com. You'll find a ton of episodes. True crime. If you're a true crime junkie, then you will love our website, charliecrimebuster.com. All right, now I think we're pretty well through. Well, nope, forgot to tell you about our YouTube channel, Charlie Crimebuster's YouTube channel. Just go to youtube.com/that Charlie Crimebuster. You see, every week, James Buckland, our producer, great guy, done tireless work for this podcast, and we both do this on a volunteer basis. And he's right there with me and volunteering his time, and I appreciate him so much. James Buckland and I, we take time to discuss the previous podcasts that we drop on these episodes. So this podcast today, we're going to talk about it in the middle of the week. Last week's podcast, we talked about in the middle of last week. In fact, you can go right on over there to YouTube, to our YouTube channel, and you can find that one, and you can hear us as we talk about it. We always had a little more in those episodes, and also James is very good at asking the right kind of question to get you the right kind of information. So I do encourage you to check out the YouTube channel. All right, let's get right into our case today. The Subway Hero or Subway Killer. We're talking, of course, about Daniel Penny and this trial that's going on at this point. It was actually on May the 1st, way back in 23. Boy, it doesn't seem like it just happened a few months ago, doesn't it? That was when a guy by the name of Jordan Neely, he was a 30-year-old homeless man, and he died. He died after a 24-year-old former Marine by the name of Daniel Penny, well, he put him in a chokehold. Now, Neely had got on that subway at 2nd Avenue Station. And as he got on the subway, he was screaming out loudly, threatening people. Said he wasn't afraid to go to prison. Now, there was a freelance journalist who happened to be on that subway train, Alberto Vasquez. He witnessed that incident. He said that Neely removed his jacket, threw it violently to the floor. Of course, other passengers began to run away. Now, Vasquez, he's kind of on the other side. He said he did not see anybody really being assaulted physically. But there were other witnesses there. They reported fearing death from Neely's actions. He would throw trash at other people. He approached them. And then, of course, we know the story that Penny then approached Neely from behind and put him in a chokehold. Now, as he was screaming, he was threatening. He said, I don't have food. He said, I don't mind going to jail and getting life in prison. He said, another witness heard him say, someone is going to die today. So, my friend, from all I can see and looking at these, and we'll be sharing some of these witnesses, what they said, I see that this man was threatening bodily harm, seriously bodily harm. He was threatening to kill people. Penny said that Neely repeatedly threatened to kill other passengers. Now, Vasquez, he said he was frightening, but he had not assaulted anyone. Now, the other witnesses, he said he would lunge at people and got right in their face. And many people, many of them, recalled fearing for their very lives. Even last week, remember I told you about a mom who had a child. Said he was charging at passengers. Said she shielded herself and the child behind a stroller, believing she might die. Yep, she might die. Well, there are some people, the prosecution said, well, people just put up with this all the time. Well, I don't know about you, but if I'm around somebody threatening to kill me, I think I'm going to be on high alert. And I just don't see this as just a everyday type thing. Now, the defense attorneys, they actually quoted a witness saying that she had been riding the subway. Now, get this, that she had been riding the subway for years. This is someone who's been on the subway continually. But this is what she said. She said she had never encountered anybody that put the fear into her as much as this Neely guy did. Now, we did find out in the trial, and especially when it came down to the last day of the testimony of the medical examiner this past week, they did say and mention earlier that he was high on drugs, synthetic marijuana. Now, it's just not synthetic marijuana, my friend. This is called K2, much more potent. It was quoted by some people saying that it was 100 times more potent. So now you have this deranged guy hiked up on drugs. I cannot tell you how important that is. Now, it's just kind of glossed over in this trial. But I remember back in the day, you're going to hear me talk about my age, aren't you? But I remember back in the day, my friend, of when PCP was a big thing. And I remember officers shooting people on PCP, emptying the chamber when they had the wheel guns, and the guy was still coming. So this idea of being hyped up on drugs, my friend, is not something just to merely gloss over, you know. Well, of course, the Marine comes, puts him in a chokehold then. And Neely is struggling, trying to get away. Now, in fact, one witness said, and this is important too when you look at this thing, he's trying to subdue this guy. He's trying to subdue this madman. And as he's trying to subdue him, one witness said it did not look like Penny had control of the situation due to the struggle. So he's going to have to put a little more pressure on. Now, Penny had asked other riders to call the police while he had him on a chokehold. And if you remember last week, we mentioned the fact that This chokehold is used in martial arts. It's used in law enforcement training, has been used. I was taught it. And it's also been used in the military as a technique for restraint in basic training. So he is going back to his training. This is a way to subdue this person. Now, another witness that they called to the stand said that at some point during the chokehold, Penny relaxed his grip, and Neely had coughed up some stuff. Now, that same witness noted that nobody on the train car was telling Penny to stop his chokehold. A lot of passengers were even being hostile toward Neely, and they supported Penny for his actions. But about 50 seconds, according to some, Neely became motionless. Now, Penny and one man who was still restraining Neely's arms, well, they released their hold on him. Then somebody said, don't put him on his back, though. He might choke on his own spit. So Neely was placed by Penny. Let me say this. Was placed by Penny on his side. It's called a recovery position. So, this idea in these charges that's brought against Penny, there has to be intent and reckless actions. I do not see that Penny intended to kill this man. I don't think anybody can see that he intended to kill this man. Now, one passenger looked on him and said, he's all right, he ain't going to die. Now, think about this. What I've tried to do right now is to put you on that train, so you can see what's taking place. I can see myself on this train. Here is this maniac yelling at people, this maniac that's out of his mind, who's threatening people, saying, I do not care if I go to prison or not, someone is going to die. That's the kind of things that he was screaming. I'm putting myself there. Will you put yourself there? Let's take it a step farther. If you have a daughter, sir, and you put your daughter on that train, what would you think then about the actions of this Marine who came to the rescue? Now, some of you may be thinking that I'm not giving the victim in this case full focus. Well, I'm going to say to you, first of all, it's debatable as to who the victim really is. Maybe the victims are those people on the train. Maybe the victim is that mother who tried to shield her baby, her daughter, by a stroller. Maybe that is the victim. Maybe the victim are those people who have testified one after the other that they feared for their life. Well, I tell you what I'm going to do. I am going to talk to you about the victim. I want to tell you about this guy, and I'm going to cover it in its whole. I'm not going to make it slanted. It's going to be exactly who this guy is. You're going to hear all about him, who he is, all the problems in his life, and then maybe you will feel a little better that I'm being fair in the treatment of this particular case. We're going to do that in a moment, but right now, let's just take a moment. Let's step back. Let's go away from the darkness of this case, and let's relax. Let's take a breath, as now it's time for Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. Now, I can tell you right off the bat, the best way to end up on Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook story is to run from the popo. You see, oftentimes I had people who ran from me when I was trying to pull them over as a deputy sheriff. And it never ended up good for anybody, especially for the person that was running from the popo. You see, my friend, it can be dangerous to run from the popo, even for others all around you. Well, our crazy crook today is an 18-year-old California man. And this guy decided to take the popo on a pursuit ride. His name was Marcus Burton. And he actually did take the police, the California Highway Patrol, on a high-speed chase right down the expressway. And get this, it reached speeds up to 100 miles per hour. He was in a hot, souped-up Mustang, and he decided he was going to outrun the Popo. Now, the problem with this is that when people do this, they do not think at all, in my opinion, but they do not take the time to think about other people that they are endangering. They're endangering the lives of innocent people that are taking a drive on the road. They're endangering their own life. They're endangering the life of the officer. It is dangerous when you're involved in a high pursuit chase. This one went up to 100 miles per hour, and you know what else? He ended up hitting another SUV with a family inside it. Now, thankfully, there were minor injuries and nobody died this time. But the reason I'm calling this a crazy crook story is not just because he ran from the police. Because, in this day and time, we have those personalized tags, registration tags on our car. Well, guess what was on the car of this Mustang, of this 18-year-old young man who is indeed a crazy crook? His registration tag had 2 words on it. Are you ready? Will run. Now, nothing says to you to get ready for pursuit any more than pulling over somebody who has a tag that says will run. I've told you before about a high pursuit chase that I was involved in that lasted 1 hour and 15 minutes. When I was pulling over that vehicle in the early hours of the morning, my gut instinct, we call them spidey senses, told me this person was going to run. Well, guess what? You would not need spidey senses to know this guy was going to run, because on his tag were the words, will run. So my friend, this crazy crook who did not think that he was endangering himself and others, did not think when he ended up hitting an SUV with a family inside it, this crazy crook who did not think when he put on his license tag the words will run, this indeed becomes Charlie Crimebuster's Crazy Crook of the Week. All right, now back to our main focus. I told you I was going to tell you a little bit about the victim, and I may be considered by some folks who are listening to this podcast that I'm not being fair. Well, I like to be fair, so I'm going to tell you for sure about this victim. It is a sad story. Jordan Maurice Kane Neely, 30 years of age. He's a black man who grew up there in New Jersey. In the earlier part, he was said to be a talented dancer. Throughout his teens and his 20s, he was actually known locally as a Michael Jackson impersonator. And he performed, of all places, on Times Square. Yep, Times Square. On subways and even in subway stations. So he had that history. In 2007, it was even a sadder history. When Neely was 14 years of age, 14 years of age, imagine being 14 years of age, well, his mother was murdered, as it is usually, by a man that she had been in an abusive relationship with. And her body? Well, her body was found in a suitcase. Yep, in a suitcase on the side of the Henry Hudson Parkway. And as if that is enough to impact a young 14-year-old, well, the young Neely was called to testify at trial. Now, according to his aunt and others, they believe that this really impacted his life. He went into a major depression. He had post-traumatic stress disorder after the mother of his murder. And unfortunately, he, as hundreds and thousands of others, ended up being placed into foster care as a youth. And as he came out of that life, it did not get any better. He had an extensive criminal record. 42 arrests. 42 arrests. This man on the subway, in this incident, had been arrested 42 times. It included petty larceny, jumping subway turnstiles, theft. But get this, you say, oh, that's just nonviolent crime. There were also 3 3, not 1, not 2, but 3 unprovoked assaults on women in the subway. Now, remember, this is a young man on the subway threatening to kill people, threatening to kill others, doesn't care whether he goes to prison or not. He's already assaulted 3 women, and you often see a progression in this, assault all the way to murder. He's already assaulted 3 women on the subways between 2019 and 2021. And this is the guy that Daniel Penny had to deal with on that subway. Yep, it's sad. He was homeless. He had been involuntarily in the hospital, hospitalized for mental issues. According to The Guardian, he became homeless and actually slipped into, quote unquote, a cycle of mental health crisis. He had been research says that he was a client of the Bowery Residence Committee, and they were trying to find him permanent shelter. He was actually listed on a maintained roster in the city. They have a roster. This was a roster of homeless people considered to be the most in need of assistance and treatment. But listen, he was also resistant to accepting help and assistance, as often these mental patients are. Well, my friend, you can't help someone who will not accept it, right? Yep. It is a sad story. I will admit that. It is a sad story, and it is sad. But as I said last week, just because someone has a mental issue does not mean that person is not dangerous. In fact, I would say that it can mean that person could be dangerous. I know when I was on the street, and we were taught about people who have mental problems. But one thing we were taught is that those folks often are unpredictable. You can't ever tell what you're getting into. And at that point on that train, I believe that Daniel Penny did not know what would happen. But he did know that the worst could have happened, and he moved to keep that from happening. Well, something else interesting. After his death, his funeral was held on May the 10th, there in Harlem. Around 200 people showed up. More people than would show up at most of ours, right? But these people included, now get this, a host of Democratic politicians. Yep, even the lieutenant governor. And now, my friend, it becomes political. And when it becomes political, you can rest assured there will be a court hearing. Yep, it is true. And here is where Daniel Penny is, I believe, unfairly thrown into a race war. They described him as the white Marine. But my friend, let me tell you, he did not come to the rescue. If there's one thing I know, and one thing I know about this case, and you can take this to the bank, he did not come to the rescue of those people on that train because he was a racist. He did it because he was a Marine. And once a Marine, always a Marine. Yep. Once a Marine, always a Marine. So now we get to the trial. Yep, we get to the trial. And the Manhattan District Attorney's Office, well, they wrapped up that case this past Friday. And they wrapped it up with a medical examiner. Now, over the last 2 weeks, the prosecution, well, they had all kinds of jurors there. They were showing to the jurors all kinds of people. Nearly 36 witnesses came to testify. Their testimony, give it. They played 911 calls. And then they kind of ended up their case with their star witness. Enter the medical examiner. And the medical examiner said that the case was a homicide, all due to compression on the neck. Now, Penny's attorneys, they refuted the findings. They said he was trying to protect the passengers on the train. Now, Dr. Cynthia Harris, that's the medical examiner, she says when Neely was released from the chokehold, she says he was already brain dead. She testified that she found multiple signs of trauma during the autopsy. Hemorrhaging of the neck, chest, spleen, small pools of blood in his eyes from ruptured vessels. All of this, according to her, was because he was placed in a chokehold. Now, Harris testified about the significant moments of the video where she said she could see signs of death. His face turns purple, involuntary movements consistent with the brain dying. And so the medical examiner presents photos of Neely, pointing out all kinds of things, welts on his neck, fingernail markings from Penny's grip. Now, Penny's attorney, they come back and they challenge him. And they said that at one time, after she was working on this autopsy, she said that the cause of death was pending further study. So Harris comes back and she says, well, I was operating then under the assumption that when he was released from the chokehold, he was still screaming. But she said that changed to the compression of the neck 2 days later after seeing cell phone video. She said after watching it, she had no further questions as to why he was dead. Now, so there you have it. That's going to be their star witness. That's going to be the medical examiner who comes to say that he died as a result of the chokehold. But let me point out some other things. It's become clear even during the prosecution's part of the case. Even among those witnesses that the prosecution called, they mentioned they were fearing for their life, that they felt their life was in danger. And if, my friend, someone's life is in danger of serious harm or death, then you have the right to defend yourself and you have the right to defend others from that serious death. That's what this is going to get down to. And it's very, very serious because if he is convicted, he'll face up to 15 years in prison for coming to the aid of other people. So this is an important case. It is a vital case. And we are going to see how the jury what they will decide, what their verdict will be. And now it's time for the defense. So far, it's been the prosecution. I've been somewhat surprised because even in the prosecution's case, there is testimony from person after person who are saying that they felt that their life was in danger. Now, the chokehold was used. And the chokehold could have well caused his death. I'm not arguing the fact that the chokehold probably caused his death. I believe maybe it did. But whether it did or it did not, I think the whole focus of this case is going to be whether Daniel Penny acted in self-defense of either himself or others on that subway. All right, what say ye? I'd love to hear from you. You can reach out to me with a shout-out, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com, charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Don't forget this week, James and I will be discussing this. We will be talking about this. There will be some bonus material there for sure. Just go to Charlie Crimebuster, slash it, hashtag it, Charlie Crimebuster. Join us on our YouTube channel. So this is Charlie Crimebuster. We're going to continue to follow this case because now it's time for the defense. For the defense to put their part of the case on. Can't wait to hear about it. We will tell you all about it next week. So until this time next time, this is Charlie Crimebuster reminding you, be safe, be alert. Yep, for the life you save, it could be your very own.
You have been listening to Charlie Crimebuster. You can find additional podcasts at charliecrimebuster.com. You can also support our first responders, military, and law enforcement communities at peacemakernetwork.com. Or subscribe to our YouTube channel using tag @CharlieCrimebuster. Even visit our Facebook page, facebook.com/CharlieCrimebuster. Or if you would like to make suggestions for future podcasts, please send your ideas to charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. That's charliecrimebuster@gmail.com. Thank you for joining us today, and we hope that you will join us next week for another exciting crime story with Charlie Crimebuster.